Hello and welcome to another episode of Step Up with Stephanie, Life Lessons that Elevate the Soul. I'm your podcast host, Stephanie Morrow, and I'm excited that you are here with me today. So if you are listening for the very first time, welcome. I'm appreciative of you being here. For those of you that are returning, thanks for being here. Also, I want to say that it is like my ultimate goal to really be able to grow the podcast and to grow the audience. So do me a huge favor. If you hear something today that resonates with you, take a moment to like, to share, and definitely to subscribe. As I said, it's really my goal to just grow the audience and grow the impact with the work that we're doing here. And so I can only do that if you help me with that. So take a moment to absolutely like, share, and subscribe. So before we get into today's episode, I'm really excited to talk about this because I think it's such a befitting time of year as we are going into the holiday season. We're actually really in the midst of the holiday season. By the time this episode airs, it'll be the middle of December. People are making their lists, they're checking them twice, putting up the trees, their holiday parties, family parties. Everyone's getting their matching pajamas ready for pajama night on Christmas Eve. I know my family certainly is. But the reality is a lot of people are in a state of burnout right now. So we're really at that midpoint of the year. For some, maybe if you're in school or college, this is kind of the midpoint. For others, we're at the end of the year, more, in the corporate space or things like that. And so we can be really just butting up against burnout. We've done so much. We've hit it so hard, so heavy, going. And so many people are just feeling the brunt of burnout right now. So when we talk about this idea of being on a soul evolution journey, it's so important that we are aware of ourselves, where we are, what we're feeling, and making sure that we have the tools to really navigate through those experiences. And so, this episode for me is like therapy because I'm talking to you, but I'm also talking to myself because I too have found myself in a state of burnout. I know a couple of weeks ago, I was just really feeling bad, not really sick, but just not feeling well, and was talking to a coworker about some things and talking to my husband about some things, and I was like, something is just not right. And I promise you, Spirit had me to Google burnout, and I came across a list of 15 things, and y'all, everything on the list applied to me. And I had to sit with that for just a moment. I was like, Stephanie, you are in burnout. Like, you are burning out. You are burning this thing at both ends, and you've got to do something about it. So this episode is for the person that might be experiencing burnout, and we're going to be talking about moving from burnout to breakthrough. And you don't just do that with your words. Like, there are some things, some mental paradigms that you've got to shift, and some mindset shifts that you've got to do, and actually some actions that you can take to really help to mitigate burnout. So when we think about burnout, it is defined as a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged or excessive stress. So that's the textbook definition of burnout. But as I said, you kind of feel it more so than anything. And so firstly, we're going to be talking about some of the signs of burnout. After we go through and talk about some of the signs of burnout, then we're going to talk about some of the things that can cause burnout. And just like the teacher that you know that I am, I'm going to give you some solutions, some things that you can take action on at the end of the podcast to really help to mitigate burnout if you are experiencing burnout. So one of the first signs of burnout is constant fatigue. Y'all, I promise I can sleep 7 or 8 hours sometimes, and I get up and it's like I've been asleep for 30 minutes. So just having this idea of being constantly drained and exhausted, and even when you're resting, you don't feel rested. Just this sense of fatigue. I don't know how else to really describe it. Maybe you're struggling to get out of bed, or you're just constantly feeling overwhelmed, or you have the lack of energy, or just not being at yourself in terms of just your energy level. So that could be a sign of burnout. It doesn't mean that every time you're tired that you're experiencing burnout. But once again, we're talking about something that's happening over a period of time and that's pretty excessive and pretty consistent. The second sign that you might be experiencing burnout is if you're having changes in your appetite or your sleep patterns. So for example, maybe you are oversleeping, maybe you're in bed but you're not sleeping. There are some times that I'm sleeping but I don't feel like I'm really resting. As I said, I can wake up and I feel simply exhausted after sleeping for 6, 7, maybe even 8 hours. And so appetite changes are also very commonly associated with burnout. Maybe you find that you are overeating or stress eating. You might even find that you are not eating. You don't have an appetite. And so you're not, really keeping up and giving your body what it needs to function properly. That could also be a sign that you are, experiencing burnout. Once again, it doesn't mean that if you miss a meal, you're having burnout, but we're talking about a pattern that's really evolving and emerging over time. Another sign is kind of just that loss of motivation and apathy. You find that you're being a lot more cynical or you're being indifferent or things like that. Those could be signs that you are really experiencing burnout. I know for me, my set point is usually pretty positive. And so when I find that I'm, being short or indifferent or things like that, it, gives me a reason to to pause for a minute and think, okay, where is this really coming from? So just that apathy, once again, is just so hard to get things done and to give your attention to any task. I know for me, it's been really hard to complete things, starting things. My attention, span is short. You start something and before you know it, you're totally off task. You're over here scrolling on social media or, you stop in the middle of a task because you just don't have enough wind to get it done. And, okay, I'm going to lay down and take a power nap and come back to it. And it's like pulling teeth to just get small things done. That could be, a sign also about this thing around burnout. Another sign that we don't often associate with burnout is physical symptoms. Sometimes we have unexplained pains or just things going on in our body. I'm a firm believer in energy, and so I know that we hold things. And so if we are holding, feelings of being overwhelmed or frustrated or burnout, those things eventually manifest in our bodies. Like we're carrying that somewhere, whether it's back pain, neck pain, it could be, in your joints. I have just been in so much pain at times. I'm so thankful for muscle relaxers, right? But just pain, sometimes rashes in your body. Things that'll show up, no unexplained, they're very unexplained. You haven't changed your diet. You haven't, come into contact with any type of foreign substance, but just things are happening in your body. So once again, being mindful of that and paying attention, those are things that could be resulting from just this burnout. And I want to say this too about the symptoms, right? Like they're not absolute. And some of them may be working in tandem or alongside each other. You may be experiencing a few of these symptoms. For me, you might be, I was experiencing a lot of the things when I first, took a look at a list of 15 things. I was actually absolutely overwhelmed. I couldn't believe it. Or you may just be, experiencing a few. So there aren't any absolutes to this. Another one is emotional outbursts. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. You're finding that you're just short with people. Your wire is short, whether it's with your kids, with your spouse, your mate, the people around you, the person that cuts you off in traffic or that's not moving fast enough when you're on the line at the store. Everything is just, every small things become a big thing. So those are just some things to think about in terms of some of the signs, and you might be experiencing some of those things. Remember, there was a list of 15 things. I only mentioned about 5 of them here today. So it's important when we're thinking about burnout that we understand the causes of burnout. So those are some of the symptoms, but what are some of the things that are causing burnout? And there are a couple of different categories of factors that I want to talk about in terms of what could be causing workout. And there is a work-related list of things that we can be looking for, and there's also a list of personal factors that could be contributing to burnout. So I want to talk firstly about some of the work-related factors. And I think it's important that we really lean into this because we spend more time at work than we do with our children, with our spouses, with our families. We spend a lot of time at work. And so with that said, the work environment that we're in greatly contributes to our experience. And so whether that experience is great, whether that experience is not so great, more than likely your work environment is having an impact on the way that you're feeling and could be contributing to some of that burnout. I believe that our work should, be something that gives us a great deal of pride and joy. It should be something that we enjoy doing. After all, we're there more hours than we are in any other place throughout the course of the day. And that's whether you're, working for a company or an agency or an organization, or even if you're running your own business. You'll find that as a business owner, you often, work more hours than you did possibly when you, when you had a job. And so work should be meaningful. And when it's not, it can wear and tear on the soul and on the spirit over time. So when we're thinking about work-related factors, one is having an unrealistic workload or deadlines. Maybe you're butting up against, those deadlines. You've got projects that you need to complete. You've got things that need to be done. And those things, they're piling up on you. Those things could start leading to burnout in the workplace or workplace burnout that is stemming from your work environment. Another thing in the work environment that can lead to burnout is having a lack of control and autonomy and agency. I am a professional, for example, and so I get a great deal of joy over having agency in my work. And when I'm in an environment, where I don't have the autonomy, or I feel like people are making decisions for me that I can make for myself, that makes me feel a certain kind of way. And so, for example, if that's happening with you over and over and over again, that could be a micromanaging boss, right? Or a supervisor that's wanting to tell you how to do. First of all, they'll tell you that they want you to do something and not trusting the expertise and the experience that you bring to the role. Then they go on to tell you how to do it, right? And as adults, that just doesn't jive well for most people. So those types of situations over and over and over in the workplace can also start leading to some burnout. So maybe there's a toxic work environment. This is a huge one. There's so many articles and research and so many people talking about just the impact that a toxic work environment can have on the psyche. If you are on LinkedIn, if you're not, firstly, I encourage you to be there on the professional side of things. There's so much great information and so many great communities and things that are there. And there's a lot there around, as I said, just toxic work environments where you may be experiencing harassment. You could be, experiencing, being bullied in the workplace. Those things are real. And maybe you've not experienced them, but they are absolutely happening in the workplace. This idea of microaggressions in the workplace, not getting the support that you need in your role, the appropriate coaching and training and modeling that you need to be successful in your role, and just over time, feeling like that you're just struggling or that you're alone and you don't have the support that you need. That's going to weigh on you over a period of time. In addition to all of the other things, that is going to weigh on you. And lastly, having that lack of work-life balance. I am just an advocate of creating harmony, and that means showing up where you need to, how you need to. This idea of 50-50 really doesn't exist as we think about work and we think about our home life. So those are just a few of the causes for burnout on the work side. When we come back from the break, we'll finish up this conversation. Solstice Leadership Consulting is a boutique-style professional learning and training firm equipping organizations to develop leadership capacity in individual members and teams. Our thought leadership, combined with over 2 decades of experience in educational administration, change management, and instructional design, enables us to power current and aspiring leaders to harness the power within to drive organizational effectiveness. The vision is to create a world where leadership is synonymous with authenticity, compassion, and purpose. Our mission is to cultivate a dedication to leadership that transcends conventional managerial methods. Interested in working with Solstice Leadership Consulting? Visit us today at stephaniemorrow.com. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the personal factors that can contribute to this growing sense of burnout that we've been talking about. At the top of the list is perfectionism and unrealistic expectations. So often in our work and in our businesses, we have these high standards, and I think they're great and they're needed, right? But sometimes we can hold ourselves to unhealthily high standards or have really, really high expectations of ourselves. And over a period of time, if things aren't moving in the direction that we think they should, they can lead to disappointment. And they can also really contribute to a growing sense of burnout. Think about the idea of progress over perfection, right? So when we're thinking about perfection, we want it right. We're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform, to get things done, to have things be without spot, without blemish. And over a period of time, that can really, really weigh on you. Another personal factor is when you have stress in your life, not being able to cope properly. So you've got poor coping mechanisms. Maybe that is some type of substance abuse. Maybe that is, not getting enough rest. You're sleep deprived. Maybe you're not eating the way that you should, or you're missing meals, or all of those things, or you're overeating possibly, or overindulging in certain things, as a coping mechanism to not really deal with whatever it is that's before you. All of those things can, over time, really, really contribute to this growing sense of burnout. So be thinking about that as well. Another thing is a lack of support. And so I know I dealt with this a lot early on, the first time, that I really launched into a business. And you think that people are going to be there for you, and people are going to support your work, and they're going to do all of these things. And over time, being disappointed and not having your work supported by the people that are around you, those things can contribute to burnout. Or maybe you're feeling not supported in some things that you're endeavoring to do by a spouse or a mate or a family. There's this quote on social media that I've seen many, many times, and it says something around, if you start a business, no one claps for you. But if you say, hey, I got a new job, everyone's so excited that you have this new job. And so sometimes people don't feel supported in their endeavors, whether that is to start a business or to go back to school or to do whatever. And we're looking around for people to support us or be happy for us or really, share in that joy. And then when we don't get that, it makes us feel a certain type of way. And so that lack of support and feeling like that you're never supported, whether it's by family or friends or those people that are around you, over a period of time, when we start combining that with, poor coping mechanisms and having this sense of perfection or having unrealistic expectations. So you'll see over time, there's a compound effect. So be thinking about how the lack of social support in your life might be helping to contribute to burnout. And then this is one that we can all relate to, and I think this one is probably the most pervasive, and that is financial difficulties, right? There is always more month at the end of the money, right? And so when you are having financial challenges, in your work or in your business, just over time, the strain of not having enough, the strain of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then you're robbing Matthew, Luke, and John, and everybody else to try to make ends meet. Over a period of time, that gets at the best of you, that eats away at you. And when you start thinking about this as building blocks, as I'm talking about these personal factors, so you've got perfectionism, you've got poor coping mechanisms, you've got the lack of social support, and then you top that off with financial difficulty, you've got some problems that are brewing, right? So money worries, or maybe you're worried about your job security, they're laying off and things of that nature, and all of those things, just over time, they could get at the best of us over time. So be thinking about some of those personal factors that you might be experiencing. And then this is one that we don't think about. We're talking a lot about it more now than we have ever before, but that's underlying mental health issues or undiagnosed mental illness, or we're seeing that more in our community, especially as people of color, being brought to the forefront to be able to, to talk about it and say, hey, there is a thing, people can have all the money and everything in the world and still find themselves depressed or unhappy, or these feelings of loneliness or isolation, or different things that have to do with mental health. So as I said, we're talking a lot about mental health a lot more now in our community, but that is something that can lead to burnout, especially if we are talking about mental health issues that are unsupported or undiagnosed, or people are just having to muddle their way through it. We'll say things like, oh, that's just how he is, or that's just how she is, or that's just what she does, when really sometimes at the core there is some mental health issue that really needs to be addressed. So those are some of the personal factors that could be contributing to a mounting sense of burnout. So now, as we wrap up today's episode, I can't do that without talking about solutions or ways to mitigate burnout, or some things that you could do to begin to address the burnout that you might be experiencing. And, the first thing on that list is being able to acknowledge and accept. When I was, feeling that way a few weeks ago, and, I was Googled that list and saw that list and reflected, I stopped and I accepted in that moment that that's where I was. I didn't pretend that it wasn't happening. I didn't pretend that, something else was going on, or that it would just go away. I had to accept that. Acceptance is the first step to any type of change or any type of transformation. Not making a comparison to, myself or someone with some type of addiction or anything like that. But when you think about the 12-step programs, acceptance, being able to say that a thing is a thing, that is the first step in any process. You can't go through any of the other steps, whether that's a 12-step program or a 5-step program. You can't do anything until you accept where you are. And that was a hard reality, because I am a high achiever and I hold myself to a high standard. And I am what I call sometimes an octopus on roller skates. So I've got all of these things going on around me. I'm managing work, I'm managing school, I'm a full-time student, I'm building a consulting business, I'm working on a podcast, I have active children, I have a marriage that I'm, maintaining. All these different pieces are pulling, and there are only so many hours in the day. So just trying to tier and prioritize where to spend the time, where to spend the effort, all of those things. So I had to just acknowledge that I was in burnout and accept that. And when you're in denial, it only prolongs the struggle. It's like you can do it now or you can do it later. So not accepting the burnout isn't going to change anything, because that awareness and that acceptance helps me to now start thinking of ways to work through it. So denial isn't going to help you. So moving into a space and place of acceptance is going to be the first step or the first solution. Once we have done that, we can really begin to prioritize rest and rejuvenation. I cannot tell you how excited I am over the next few weeks to be able to really, really unplug. It is the holiday season. There's things that we've got planned with friends, with family. I was just talking earlier about I'm turning off every laptop, every computer, out of office, no technology, probably very little or no social media at all. And I want to prioritize rest and rejuvenation. I want to know what it feels like to get in the bed and not have to set the alarm clock, because I have nowhere to be the next day. I want to, actually be able to lay on my couch and eat the bonbons and watch all of the corny holiday movies. I want to prioritize rest and rejuvenation. And so think about ways that you can actually do that. Maybe you've got some time off from work that you're going to be taking. How can you prioritize rest? Because I'll tell you, in times past, I've rested, but I'm still working while I rest. I may be, thinking that I'm having some downtime in the evening and I'm watching a movie, but I'm still there on my laptop. I'm still working on something. I'm still working on a document. I'm still doing some type of research. So I'm multitasking. I'm really not even in the moment because my mind is still racing and still moving in all these different directions. So how can you disconnect over, the next few days or few weeks if you have the time off to really, really prioritize rest and rejuvenation, and not just during this holiday season, but moving forward? Because the holiday, this season is just here for that, brief period of time. But moving forward, as we move into the new year and start thinking about the life that we want to create for 2024, how can you think about chunking your time or living your life that will allow you to have those periods of rest and rejuvenation, and you set the time aside to make sure that those things happen? The next thing that you can do, that we can do, is to set boundaries and delegate. And this is really, really hard for me because I'm a recovering control freak. And so I like things done in a certain way. So delegating can be very, very hard. One of the first business coaches that I worked with, Trevor Otts, would often say, the answer to who doesn't have to be you. So we'll have all these questions. Well, who's going to do this, and who's going to make this happen, and who's going to ensure that this is taking place? And the reality is this: the answer to who does not have to be you. I'll give you an example. I am really big on cooking for my family, right? So we're very busy in the evenings. There's always a practice or a game or something. And I'm just not a big fast food person. I really cringe sometimes going through the drive-through for my kids in the evening. They would love to eat out every day if they could. I'm kind of old school. I really like to cook, but I oftentimes don't have the time to cook. And I'm letting myself off the hook a little bit when it comes to having to eat out a couple of nights a week, right? And so what's the best thing that we can find? Or, like McDonald's is absolutely not on the list, never ever. What's the best of two evils, right? So maybe we can find something healthy on the go or that type of thing. But they have to eat, but I don't have to be the one to cook the meal. So the answer to what's for dinner doesn't have to be me in the kitchen for a couple of hours putting a meal out. I'm learning that. Or, for example, I could ask my husband to help to do something with the kids. He is not going to do it the way that I'm going to do it, but he's going to do it. So letting him do it his way and being okay with it, just releasing that control, asking for help, delegating, and then letting it go, detaching from what comes of it and just letting it be. And that's a really hard one for me, but that is helping me to, not feel overwhelmed, and that overwhelm turning into burnout over time. Another thing that we can do to really help with burnout is to seek support. Whether that is through a mental health professional. Therapy is definitely trending right now. A lot of times you have EAP benefits at your job. I heard Bishop Jordan talk about using your insurance for wellness instead of sickness. So using your insurance to see a mental health professional, just to have that person there that can help you navigate some of these struggles that we're talking about. So seeking out that support. Another thing is going to be that self-care. And I was having a conversation with my sister earlier about the difference between self-care and self-maintenance. And self-maintenance are those things that we do that really speak to the outward appearance. So yes, you go get your hair done or go get a pedicure or go to a spa or those types of things. Those things are really part of a self-maintenance routine. But when we're thinking about self-care, we're talking about the spirit man. We're talking about the soul. So that is ending toxic relationships. That is setting healthy boundaries. Those are those types of things that are really part of a self-care routine. So be thinking about how you can really begin and maintain a self-care routine over the course of this year. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you've been able to take away some tips for moving from burnout to breakthrough. I will see you inside the next episode.